Hey guys, most of us would have seen the news by now. Norwood Grand, totally, absolutely incredible. 84% wiped out within the first day of launch. All the unit types were gone except for the bigger 4-beders, so including even the smaller 4-beders. In fact, there were 4 bounce out units and there were like 200 plus people fighting for that 4 units, which shows that, well, maybe Woodlands is not really as ulu as people may think it is. I myself also think that it is ulu, but it's not like a ulu. It's not like a xiang kind of ulu, but it's more like it takes some time to drive up. But then again, we have seen in many instances around Singapore that location may not necessarily be the most important in today's market anymore. On the other hand, what we are seeing now is that as long as the pricing is okay, or rather it seems to be okay, whether it is actually okay, people don't really think too much, they will still jump in. Anyway, let's just take a look at how the newspaper article says about the numbers and then let's just dive right into it. 84% of the units sold on launch day, average selling price of 2067 PSF. Almost all are Singaporeans and PRs, which is understandable considering the ABSD requirements for foreigners. Supposedly the best performing private residential in this year. All the units were sold except for the bigger ones. Like I said, most of them were priced 2 million and below, which is a sweet spot for buyers, and an estimated 60% were even below 1.8 million. However, like what we already mentioned previously, this pricing was untested, but it somehow seems that buyers were generally receptive, which has set a new benchmark launch price in Woodlands. Given the fact that even though the resale pricing are not that expensive, as long as in today's market 2000 BSF, people seems like, oh, this one is a fire sale, people are just rushing in because of like a affordability thing, especially due to the constraints of TDASR, and that's why not many are able to afford a lot higher, which is possibly why they are rushing into Norwood Grand. Buyer profile, HDB upgraders mostly in their 30s and also early 40s, supposedly buying for owner occupation. I don't really trust this part yet because they can declare all they want that it's just for their own occupation, but ultimately when we look at the sub-sale volume, then we will really know that which are the real investors or which are actually the own stayers. After this project, supposedly no more new private residential project launches, but just before the launch, the funny thing was that the government announced that the new EC almost right beside is going to be launched for tender, which is very likely going to be totally sold. I don't think that one will be rejected because so far I don't think we've heard of any EC plots that were rejected in recent years. This optimistic show at Norwood Grand could have possibly been due to the 50 basis point rate cut by the Federal Reserve, which was much higher than expected, translating to improved market confidence, increased house hunting with more optimistic buyers because they are not exactly thinking of how much interest is going to be given the current market. How is it going to be next time? That's another thing, but they are taking advantage of the falling interest rates right now, which shouldn't be going up at least for the next 2 to 3 years. Given that the resale prices are significantly lower than Norwood Grand, what we are expecting over here is that there could be some spillover effect onto the resale for this area as well. Whether it's going to be a lucrative investment for the resale over here, that leaves a lot to be questioned about. It's not going to be that simple. The most important thing what we are seeing over here is that because of how Norwood Grand performed as an OCR, and it's not just an OCR, it's a Woodlands OCR. This may encourage all the upcoming launches, all the other developers to be launching at probably a more optimistic pricing, and also maybe even bring forward their launches given the fact that maybe the end of the year due to Christmas period and also start of the year due to Chinese New Year period may not be that lucrative for them, so they may just bring forward. Of course, we do hear of a few mega launches coming up within the next 1 to 2 months hopefully, but it's not as simple because there are some issues about COH, all these, which we'll talk about next time. If we look at the impact of Norwood Grand's performance, or rather expected performance before that, you can see over here that there are quite a lot of price increment for existing projects already, which means that developers already know that buyers are able to accept the pricing, and hence they are very confident that there will be spillover effects, which is not exactly very good given the fact that still some people are just sitting at the sidelines waiting around, and this is going to make things worse. But ultimately, if you really have been observing the market over the past few years, this has always been a vicious cycle, and it happens again and again and again, because the problem is that people think they may sit around thinking that, hey, this is going to be good investment. They'll be sitting around worrying, thinking about it. But as they do that, which is common, I'm not saying that it's a bad thing to do, it is very common to many buyers that don't really know what they are doing. They are not very sure because they may be only looking at the market for a few months. They are not exactly very clear, not confident of what they are doing, skeptical, whichever it is, but the market moves with or without their action. And that's just how practical the market is actually is. Ultimately, what we need to know is that developers are moving ahead regardless, and I think even for the upcoming projects, it's going to be even more optimistic for those that are launching, because, well, if the market can accept 2,000 plus for Woodlands, why would they not be able to command a higher price for either center of Singapore or maybe the Katong side of Singapore? That is something that you may want to think about. So earlier we mentioned about the new EC at Woodlands. These are the 4 plots that were released, and this news came out one day before the launch of Norwood Grand. This is the new EC plot that was just going to be very close to Norwood, but as you can see, chose to somehow, don't you find that it's a little bit funny, they chose to somehow announce this news so close to Norwood Grand. I think what is the signal they are trying to send over here is that possibly you may want to think about it, that hey guys, why do you want to be so panicky about it? You may want to rethink, because ultimately you need to know that government is monitoring the situation, and if you really look into how they are strategizing the release of land, there are still quite some land in Singapore, regardless of how scarce land is in Singapore. There are still quite some left, but why would they want to launch all these? There must be a distinct strategy that a lot of people don't exactly know about, but I think it's quite clear to me that it's actually clear as day what they are trying to do and what their intention is. But the most important thing is, as an investor, you need to be ahead of all this to know that, hey, is this what we are trying to get into? Because you are seeking multi-million dollars, it's not going to be so simple. So one of the reasons why the Singaporeans and PR are rushing to get back into the market could be possibly because of this, which is the T-bill are coming down, which is expected, because if you think about it, the higher the Federal Reserve is giving the interest, then likely the T-bill will also go up. But if it's coming down, then T-bill is expected to be coming down. And if you look at, for those people, I do know of some people that, hey, I'm just going to hold on to a whole chunk of cash, $1 million worth of cash, and then just going to buy T-bills or hold on to fixed deposit. I mean, yeah, you can think about it that way, but ultimately, are you gonna beat inflation? And if you're not beating inflation, why would you want to be holding on to cash? Because cash that is not wisely invested is ultimately depreciating, which is definitely not something we want to be doing with a whole chunk of cash. And this could be driving people back into the property market, because ultimately this is not very low interest, but it's not as lucrative. Whereas if you go to the property market, if you know what you're doing, you're very clear, and you have people helping you out on that, there is no way you won't be able to beat this. So where are we headed to in this market? This is from URA. This is a flash estimate of Q3. There may be people thinking, hey, Q3 seems to be dropping, so is the market actually coming down? If you really think so, then I will believe that you may not be exactly very familiar with market, because if you think about it, for the past 3 months in Q3, there weren't exactly good major launches, and that could have possibly dragged down the prices. I would dare to say that Q4, given that all the other major launches are launched successfully, we should be seeing a big one coming up. So how is this going to affect the market? Is the market actually moving like this sideways, or is it moving like this, or is it moving like this? Especially given that the interest rates are expected to be dropping, the cost of home ownership is going to be dropping, or rather lowered, hence will it be expected to be dropping in terms of the market. And of course, my clients would have had much more clarity and direction to much better investment options by now, as well as me monitoring the market and exit timing for them, as compared to those who are just sitting around and rushing to new show flats for moving here and there, which is exactly not what I would encourage, because I myself, I don't like the show fair environment because it's so stressful. It's like if you don't buy, you're missing out, and that is exactly why we do have bounce out units every single launches. There will be people who bounce out on the day itself, and then a few days later there will be people who bounce out after, which is worse because they put in the money and then they have to sacrifice that 25% of the deposit, which is not a small amount of money as well. If you think that's more, than just give the money to me lah. I think that's I'll be more than happy to advise you on the right part. So anyway, the key thing over here is that, remember, a good sellout project on the first day does not always necessarily mean a good project, because some of the best projects in recent years, if you look at the sub-sale performance and also resale performance, some of them happen to be some of the worst performing launch day ones, but they do manage to flip around and make a whole chunk of money. Just because other people are rushing in does not always mean that it is the best thing. So that will be all we have for today. If you have anything, feel free to reach out, and that will be all we have. Take care. See you. Bye bye.